Hello and welcome back. I'm Karen Sullivan of Soul Symbols, and this is our Friday contemplation. On Mondays, I look at the wider sky, the broad view and the larger pattern, and that archetypal web moving through our collective field. And on Fridays, I come down to the ground, into our lived reality, and that felt texture of a pattern. So we will be moving on Fridays into deeper explorations of not only what it means in the sky, but in our bodies, choices, relationships, and in the deeper architecture of life. So get your headphones, put your feet up, and enjoy this reflection with me. This Friday, I want to spend some time contemplating the element of air. We looked at fire last Friday, and this week I want to look at air. I've been thinking about air not just as the atmosphere around us, but as breath, thought, language. I've been thinking about it as the nervous system, communication and transmission. Air is invisible, but it's never ever empty. It carries sound, scent, weather. It carries pollen, smoke and disease. And it also carries music, speech, prayer, beauty and meaning. And as Uranus moves into Gemini and begins to form a trine with Pluto in Aquarius, both of these great outer planets are speaking through air signs. So this feels like an important moment to reflect on what air really is and what it means to live inside an atmosphere of thought, language, media, technology, and collective belief. Because we don't see the wind, but we know where it's been by what it moves. We see the leaves tremble and the trees bend. We can see ripples moving across water. We can feel the air shift before a storm. The wind itself is unseen, but its passage is known through the body of the world. And I think thought and speech are very much the same. We don't see a thought as a physical object, nor a word once it's left the mouth. Yet we know where the thought has been by what it shapes. And we know where words have passed by the movement they create in the body. A thought can tighten our chests and a memory can alter our breathing. Words can soften the face or make the jaw lock. And a conversation can change the whole atmosphere in a room. So today I want to look at air as an invisible force with visible consequences. I want to look at Gemini and Aquarius, Uranus and Pluto, and the airwaves, viral content, collective thought, and the strange image of the first breath after birth. Because somewhere in this astrology, I think we're looking at a huge change in the atmosphere. We don't see the wind, but we know it by its effects. And that's been a sentence that I've been turning over in my mind. So the wind passes through the world and the world responds. A branch bends, a curtain lifts, a candle flickers, the surface of the water is disturbed, and a field of grass leans in one direction as though the invisible has drawn its hand across the earth. And this is one of the mysteries of air. It's subtle, but it isn't weak. It's unseen, but it isn't absent, and it can't be held in the hand, but it can alter everything it touches. In astrology, air is often spoken of through ideas, thought, communication, reason, language, connection, and social exchange. And all of that is true, but I think air becomes much more powerful when we remember that it is also breath and spirit. It's the breath that carries speech, that steadies the body, that changes when the nervous system feels safe, threatened, excited, overwhelmed, inspired, or afraid. Every word we speak is carried on breath, and every conversation enters the body through listening. So every atmosphere we live inside is something we are breathing in, not only literally, but psychologically and symbolically. So air isn't detached from the body, air moves through the body, and this is why words matter so much. A word's not only a sound, it's a movement of air shaped by meaning. It leaves the body of one person and enters the field of another. So it can settle something or disturb it, and it can open the breath of another or close it. It can become memory, and it can become our identity. It can become an inner voice that continues speaking long after the original speaker is gone. And we all know this from our experience. So a kind word can soften our whole bodies, and that cruel world can make our body brace. A truth that's spoken at the right moment can feel like fresh air entering a closed room, but a lie can create a fog that takes years to clear. So although thought and speech are invisible, they're not unreal. They leave traces, and they shape posture, breath, mood, memory, and relationship. And this is where I think the astrology becomes very alive, because we're moving into a period where air signs, and particularly Gemini and Aquarius, are being activated by powerful outer planets. Gemini and Aquarius are both air signs, but they're different kinds of air. So Gemini is the quickened mind, so that conversation, question, exchange, that movement between one thing and another. So it's curiosity, language, writing, learning. It's the naming, the speaking, the listening and translating. It's connecting. So it's that messenger moving between worlds. Gemini is the air of the nervous system and the air of thought moving quickly. It's the air of words forming and travelling. And Aquarius is also air, but it's wider and more structural. It's more about collective air. So Aquarius can be seen as the social atmosphere and the shared mind. So that would be the networks, systems, ideologies, technologies. It can be groups and movements and future-facing structures through which thought circulates at a collective level. So if Gemini is the message, Aquarius is that network. And where Gemini is the conversation, Aquarius is the social field that conversation enters. And if we look at Gemini as the thought passing through the individual nervous system, Aquarius is the atmosphere of thought moving through the collective body. And now we have Uranus in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius. So the two air signs are beginning to speak to one another through these outer planets. Uranus brings disruption, awakening, shock. It can bring us invention, liberation, and breakthrough. So it breaks open familiar patterns and interrupts the expected route. It can arrive like a flash of lightning through the mind, changing how we see everything. In Gemini, Uranus electrifies Mercury's territory. Mercury rules Gemini. So we're looking at the electrification of language, thought, speech, media, information, writing, learning, transport, technology, and symbolic exchange. Our narratives might begin to crack open, and the old categories we're familiar with might not hold in the same way. We could see rapid changes in how people speak, think, learn, communicate, how they publish, even how they travel, and definitely how they transmit information. There's disruption here, but there's also genius. Uranus in Gemini can bring real originality of mind. So it can bring that sudden flash of inspiration, insight, unexpected connections, new forms of language, a kind of strange brilliance and inventive thinking, and the idea that breaks through a stale mental structure. And when air becomes electrified, the nervous system feels it. This is really, really important. This isn't only about ideas becoming more innovative. It's also about the atmosphere becoming more stimulated. So we're going to have more information and voices and speed. So there'll be more contradiction, but also more invention, brilliance, and lots of noise. We might find ourselves living inside a quickened mental field where the mind is constantly being activated, interrupted, pushed and pulled, shocked, invited, alarmed, and stimulated here. So part of the work with Uranus in Gemini may be learning how to breathe inside that. And I'm not talking about shutting down the mind and rejecting innovation or fearing the new, but becoming conscious of what kind of mental atmosphere we allow into our bodies. Every message is a transmission, and air is the realm of transmission. So air carries breath and speech, but it also carries disease. It carries bacteria and viruses. We know the language of airborne illness. Something invisible enters our shared atmosphere and moves from body to body, and it's only later we see the effects, be it a cough, fever, a weakening, but it spreads. And that's a very literal expression of air. But our technological language mirrors it too. We say something's gone viral. You know, that video went viral. A phrase may catch on, or a rumour spreading, a fear circulating. It can be a story moving through the collective field faster than anyone can digest it. And I find that language fascinating because it tells us we already understand ideas can behave like contagion. And that can come through the airwaves, Wi-Fi, phones, radio, podcasts, live streams, and social media. And we're constantly transmitting and receiving. The modern world is filled with invisible signals. We're breathing an atmosphere of messages. In that kind of atmosphere, the question becomes not only what do I think, but what am I helping to circulate? Because not everything that spreads is medicine for us. Some things go viral because they simply hook the nervous system, and some things spread because they inflame people's passions. They move quickly because they bypass reflection and go straight into reaction. And of course, other things spread because they bring truth, clarity, courage, beauty. Humour spreads like the plague, and tenderness, intelligence, or relief. So a word can infect, but it also has the capacity to heal. And a message can inflame, but it can also ventilate the room we're in. So this is really important with Uranus in Gemini, because Gemini sends, speaks, names, and carries the message. And then we come to Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto is bringing us into the underworld. It's bringing us into that territory of power, wealth, survival, control, compulsion. hidden forces and buried truth, but also transformation. Pluto doesn't tend to leave things untouched. It exposes what's operating beneath the surface. And in Aquarius, Pluto is moving through collective systems. So we're looking at the realm of technology, networks, ideology, group identity, social structures, movements, institutions, and the future of society. Pluto in Aquarius can show us the shadow of the hive mind, and it can reveal where collective thought is being shaped, controlled, monetized, manipulated, or intensified. And because Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn, we can't separate this from structure. Aquarius isn't only futuristic and innovative, it also belongs to Saturn's realm of architecture, law, tradition, consequence, time, boundary, and social order. So Aquarius looks forward, but it also carries the memory of structure. It's asking what kind of future can actually hold. And it's asking which inherited systems still serve life and which have become very rigid, cold, detached, or even oppressive. So Pluto in Aquarius suggests transformation at the foundations of our collective life. It's asking us to look at the systems beneath the systems and the power beneath the networks and those hidden forces beneath public ideals. We're looking at the underworld beneath the technology as well. And this is where the image of the hive mind becomes really potent, because the hive mind can be beautiful. It can speak of that community intelligence and shared purpose, a collective creativity, and the way ideas move through a network of people. But it can also become dangerous. It can become possessed by ideology, and it can also become cold, detached, tribal, reactive, and inhuman. And there is so much in our world that reflects those very things. So Pluto in Aquarius would be asking us to look at what's moving through the collective atmosphere. Who is it who's shaping that story and controlling the signal? Who benefits when something spreads? Who is it who profits from fear, outrage, division, distraction, and addiction? What ideas have power over the body, and what beliefs have we inherited from the culture and mistaken for our own? Because none of us think in isolation. We breathe in the atmosphere of our time. We breathe in family stories, cultural stories, ancestral, religious, political stories. We breathe in economic, media, and technological stories. They move through us so constantly that we can forget to ask whether they're true, whether they're ours, or whether they're life-giving. And this is exactly where Uranus and Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius begin to work together. Uranus in Gemini disrupts the message, and Pluto in Aquarius transforms the systems the message travels through. Uranus electrifies language whilst Pluto exposes the network, and Uranus accelerates the signal while Pluto is revealing who holds power over transmission. And then we got Uranus bringing that breakthrough in the mind, and Pluto bringing the underworld transformation of the collective field. And because these planets are moving into a trine, there's flow between them. A trine has the nature of Jupiter, so it's opening a channel and allowing movement. It can bring ease, coherence, amplification, and a sense that things can travel more freely. But then ease isn't always the same as comfort. The trine can mean something moves with less resistance, so we still need to ask what's moving and what's spreading and being amplified. We need to look at what ideas are travelling more quickly than before and what breakthroughs are becoming possible because old structures are loosening. We might want to ask what forms of contagion that might also move more easily through the collective field. There is creative genius here. There can be technological innovation, new languages, a collective awakening and the breaking of silence around hidden systems of power. But there can also be here overwhelm, ideological possession. There can be nervous system agitation, misinformation, fragmentation, and collective anxiety moving through networks like wind through dry grass. So the invitation isn't simply to follow every wind, it's to become conscious of the wind, to notice what's moving through us and what atmosphere we're breathing each day, to notice which words open the body and the ones that make it break, and which stories return us to ourselves and which ones pull us into fear, suspicion, or contempt. And there's a practicality to this, because if air is thought, breath, word, and transmission, then our relationship with air can be tended. We can pause before we speak and breathe before we react, count to 10 if necessary. We can ask whether a thought is true or whether it's just familiar to us, and we can choose not to amplify every fear that's passing through the collective field. In this way, we become less available to contagion and more devoted to conscious transmission. That phrase feels really important to me, less available to contagion and more devoted to conscious transmission. And that's because to speak is to transmit, as is posting, teaching, and listening is receiving. When we repeat something, we're helping it to travel. So I'm not saying that we need to become silent or afraid of speaking. It means becoming more responsible for the air we contribute to. So we can ask ourselves, what are we giving breath to and sending through the airwaves? And what sort of atmosphere are we creating for others? It's a mindfulness here that we can step into. But it takes me, all of this, to another image that's been sitting behind this, the first breath. I've been thinking about the work of Stanislav Grof and Richard Tarnas, particularly around holotropic breathing states, but also around birth symbolism and the basic perinatal matrices. Groff's work explored how deep states of consciousness can bring people into powerful, symbolic and somnatic experiences, including imagery connected with birth, pressure, struggle, mortality and rebirth. In the basic perinatal matrices, the birth process becomes a symbolic map of consciousness. Without needing to take this literally for everyone, the symbolism is really striking. So Pluto in this system has been associated with the third matrix, that intense stage of labour. So the pressure, struggle, contraction, confrontation with mortality, and that sense of being forced through a narrow passage. And then we have Uranus that's been associated with the fourth matrix. So that's the breakthrough, crowning, completed delivery. So an emergence, a release, and that sudden opening into space. And what comes after that? The first breath. So for me, that feels profound in relation to Pluto in Aquarius and Uranus in Gemini. Pluto is the pressure of the birth passage, and Uranus is the shock of the open air. Pluto brings the underworld contraction, that encounter with survival, fear, power, and transformation. And Uranus is bringing the release, the rupture, the awakening, and that new perception. And when we look at the air signs, this becomes a birth of mind, language, network, and collective atmosphere. We could say that the collective mind is in a birth process. Something's being pressed through and it's trying to crown. There's something here that is trying to breathe. And birth isn't tidy or polite. It's physical, messy. It's so primal and irreversible. Once that first breath is taken, the old environment can't be returned to in the same way. So I'm thinking that we're not simply updating our ideas. Perhaps we're entering a different atmosphere altogether. That might be why there's both excitement and anxiety in the collective field. Uranus is bringing the thrill of the new, but also that shock of instability, where Pluto brings transformation, but also the fear of losing what's been familiar, even if what was familiar had become completely oppressive. The birth canal isn't comfortable, but it's a passage. And in this symbolism, air is waiting on the other side of that. Before birth, life is held within the waters of the womb, and after birth, life needs to breathe. The lungs must expand. The cry needs to come. So this is where voice begins and separation begins. It's a new relationship with the world. And Gemini rules speech, language, naming, and communication. So Uranus in Gemini may awaken the voice and bring a new language for old experiences. It might fracture inherited stories that have kept certain truths unspeakable for us. And Pluto in Aquarius may be exposing why the voice was silenced in the first place. So it will reveal the systems that have shaped the story, controlled the language, and decided whose voice could travel and whose couldn't. Together by trine, they might help bring through a new atmosphere of thought for all of us. But again, we need to handle that consciously, because not every single idea is liberating, and definitely not every disruption is wisdom. And not every collective movement is humane or every hive mind sacred. Not everything that goes viral is worth carrying, and air needs discernment here. Gemini can be curious, intelligent, playful, and brilliant, but it can also scatter, distort, and fragment. On the other hand, Aquarius can be really visionary, communal, and reforming, but it can also become detached, ideological, and cold. So our task is not to become carried away by every wind that blows through our room, but to listen more carefully to what that wind is carrying. So we can ask ourselves, is what it carrying fear, truth, noise, or is it medicine? Is it carrying manipulation or possibility? And most of all, is it something that helps the body to breathe? Because air teaches us that the unseen isn't powerless. The invisible can move the world. Our breath can steady the body, a word can wound and it can heal, and a thought can become a structure. Stories can become a society, and a message can become a contagion, or a message can become medicine. And the wind, though unseen, keeps showing us the truth of its passage. So as Uranus moves through Gemini and Pluto continues through Aquarius, perhaps we're being asked to become more conscious of the air we live inside, that air of thought, language, technology, memory, but the air of belief, the air waves and networks, the invisible field of transmission. So we can ask ourselves, what are we breathing in and breathing out? What are we carrying? And what are we giving breath to? And what first breath is trying to come through us now, right now? Because somewhere between Pluto's pressure and Uranus's breakthrough, something's moving. It's being forced through the old structures. It's breaking open in the mind. Something massive is changing in our collective atmosphere. And beneath all the noise, speed, disruption and static, we may begin to hear it. The first breath of a new world. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this contemplation speaks to you, you might want to pause for a moment after listening and just simply notice the atmosphere around you, your breath. Notice what your body's taking in. Notice what words are still moving through you. And perhaps ask yourself gently, what kind of air do I want to offer back into the world? And that is what I have for you. And I'll be back on Monday with the broader picture of the sky. And until then, I invite you to be tender with yourselves. Be honest with what is surfacing and listen carefully for what is alive at depth. Have a restful weekend. And I will see you on the next one. Bye-bye.